Welcome to Peer Check. I'm your host, Adam Keating, and today we're talking about the evolution of hardware and what's needed to get us through the next decade to meet and keep up with what the world needs. My guest today is founder and CEO of Shapr3D, István Csanády. Shapr3D is the world's fast-growing CAD company used by tens of thousands of engineers and designers around the world. Their Apple Design Award-winning product is available on Windows PCs, tablets, iPads, and Macs, and I'm sure you've seen it on a video going viral somewhere on social media over the last couple of years. I just want to thank you for joining me today.
Hey Adam, thanks for having me.
I'm going to ask this first. I have two parts to this question. One is what got you inspired to start Shapr3D? And the second part is why the iPad first? I've always wondered why the iPad, but give me the background. What got you going?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, I grew up with CAD, and I had two hobbies during my childhood, two unusual hobbies. I started coding when I was 6 years old, and I learned CAD when I was 13. And not a very usual combination, I guess. So it kind of feels like that I was preparing to start this company my entire life. To be honest, I'm from a family of and I'm like in the last three generations we have like 15 architects and engineers in my family, and talking about CAD during a Sunday dinner, it was a thing. It was, and usually these conversations were not very positive. Uh, those were mostly, like complaints about how incredibly frustrating this or that CAD system is, and how much pain it is to use them, and how clumsy they are, and it's like, and this was in the 1990s, and quite frankly, like, let's be honest, like not a lot has changed in the last 20 years in the world of CAD. And in 2015 when I or 2000 actually 2014 when I quit my really great job at an enterprise SaaS company where I was a software engineer. I decided to start my own company, and to be honest, I for me, because of this, it was pretty obvious that I just have to start a cat company. Um, and and in 2014, when I started to think about like what to do next, and how to approach this problem to bring this ancient software industry to the 21st century, a few things were already quite obvious. Like the first one is that there are not too many software industries in the world that are this old. So like CAD was one of the first software industries in the world, right? It's a 70 years or more than 70 years old software industry today, which is incredible. CAD was one of the first applications of computers. And it's also one of the last software industries in the world that has not been disrupted for 20, 30 years. Because to be honest, like not much has happened basically since the mid 1990s when SolidWorks became the market leader. Uh, and and to be honest, like there has not been like a dramatic conceptual shift in how we use 3D CAD or how 3D CAD systems work. Mostly what we are seeing are incremental improvements.
Mhm.
Um, and because of that, it felt like that this is a huge opportunity simply because like pretty much all the other traditional software industries got disrupted in the last 30, 40 years. Some of them got disrupted several times. And I started thinking about how come that CAD is still pretty much the same. And one of the key insights that I had in the early like in the early days of Shaper is that every single time when CAD was disrupted, the CAD industry was disrupted, it it happened because a platform shift happened. Like we like our computers changed so dramatically that for the incumbent company, for the traditional CAD company, it was incredibly hard to adapt to this new world of new computers, and then they got disrupted by a new company. Uh, the first company that did this with the mainframe computers was PTC, and PTC got disrupted by SolidWorks, and SolidWorks was riding the wave of the desktop computer revolution, and basically their strategy was to like reinvent 3D CAD for desktop computers, and by providing a graphical user interface, lowering the barrier of entry to CAD, and running on these toy machines, because by the time desktop computers were considered to be toys, right? They can just not only expand the market but disrupt it. And and if you think about Shaper, actually our playbook is the 2022 version of the SolidWorks playbook. We are betting big on mobile devices. We think that the CAD industry has completely missed the mobile revolution. That doesn't mean we're not mobile only, of course. We don't think that desktop computers are going to go away, but we are mobile first and not mobile only, right? And this was basically one of like the key driving thoughts behind Shapr3D, that in mobile devices, like by reinventing CAD for mobile devices, particularly for these next generation tablets that are not just like toys anymore, because an iPad Pro, like the latest iPad Pro, is more powerful than most desktop computers. They're like the Apple silicon chips are incredible, and we think that by focusing on these devices, we can build something that can serve our customers better in many ways than traditional
Mhm.
CAD system can. And we think of Shaper as an extension to an existing tool chain. We are not right now. We are not aiming to like completely replace
Mhm.
like a traditional CAD system, but Shaper 3D is becoming better and better every 2 weeks basically, and we are covering more and more and more of the workflow of our customers. And it's not just about the iPad. We started with an iPad application. Now we are available on even on Windows tablets and Windows PCs, Macs, iPads, and we are very excited about the future. Like what other platforms, like may disrupt the designers and engineers workflow. We think that these hardware shifts or platform shifts are just inevitable. I obviously don't know what's next, but we are very excited about what other platforms we might see in the next few years.
So those family dinners, albeit 6 years old, is probably an early age to be getting into software development. And 13 is probably also pretty early to be getting into, really thinking about how to fix CAD. I think there's a lot of people much older who are trying to figure that out still. Um, that obviously set you up to think about this problem. And then it sounds like the iPad element of this really was that, like, okay, here is the moment we have to take that next shift, like SolidWorks actually was. We've talked about some other things in the past about other changes and other big pillars that are going to invoke that kind of revolution we need in hardware to stop having this problem of, like, tools built 40 years ago, like your ERP, your PLM
Yep.
20 years ago, whatever it might be, are still the
Yeah.
same. What
Yeah.
other pillars, like waves, are people riding besides just the hardware shift? Like, what else is
Absolutely.
important for people to consider in this evolution?
Yeah, that's correct. So like basically, I think this is a good way to think about it, right? That so much changed in the last 30, 40 years that got completely ignored by design and manufacturing software vendors, that just by focusing on those things that changed the last 20, 30, 40 years, and
Mm.
focusing on those things, you can build something that is differentiated, something that solves problems that traditional solutions just can't solve by nature, right? And you can like really like reinvent basically how certain workflows should be done in 2022. Yes, I think that's a pretty good framework to think about it.
What ones outside of that are, like, top of mind for you today? I mean, cloud is obviously one of those big
Um,
things that you and
yeah,
I have talked about lots. I mean, we're here right
yeah,
now recording this podcast across the Atlantic Ocean, and it's easy, right? I mean, and, like, the
yeah,
tools and tech. But what else have you guys seen and bet on that's
yeah,
very fun?
yeah. Like yes, like cloud is definitely one of the biggest trends, and I think that and honestly, I think the way how the industry, I mean, the CAD industry has positioned the cloud in the last few years is probably not the right way to think about it. But obviously, cloud is something that CAD and design software in general should take advantage of. So I think, for example, collaboration, of course, it belongs to the cloud, right? Maybe I don't want to like do like actual design work in the cloud because probably the benefits of doing that is probably it's not that great. And but for collaboration and working together, cloud is, like, it's obviously it is a superior solution than self-hosting a PDM or a PLM server and just like fighting all the time with
Yeah.
updates and installs. It's a major pain in the neck, right? So cloud is definitely something that the CAD industry either misunderstood or completely ignored. I think another one is of course mobile devices, and I find it quite uh, strange, to be honest, that pretty much every software industry nowadays don't think of mobile devices or mobile presence or mobile apps as just, like as a secondary something. As like typically every single, like most successful software vendors nowadays
Mhm.
provide a mobile interface for their solutions, and these solutions tend to be quite feature complete and I can do pretty much everything from my mobile devices. And of course, like using a CAD system on a mobile phone would not make much sense, but a tablet that has a larger screen and nowadays they have amazing processing power. Like
Mhm.
it feels like it was designed to do design work on it, right? Uh, another, and I think this somewhat connected to mobile devices, but another trend that the industry has completely missed is the dramatic change in chip design and chip manufacturing. And this is, we are relatively early in this, and but it's already quite obvious that ARM chips are light years ahead of traditional Intel chips, and it's also quite I think it's quite obvious that these new generation ARM chips with their lower power consumption and incredible processing power
Mhm.
will just define how we do computing on silicon chips in the next, at least in the next few years. Maybe Intel will up their game and and start competing even on this front. But right now, it's pretty obvious that we are shifting towards ARM
Mhm.
chips, even in workstations. Another trend that the CAD industry has completely missed is, or well, yeah, I think we can say that it completely missed it, is the revolution in GPUs. Like graphic chips also became much more powerful than they were even like a couple of years ago or 3 years ago, and most CAD systems are not taking advantage of these amazing processing units. Not at all. Like very often they just incapable of doing that because of the way how they were built in the 1990s and because of their obsolete architectures, or sometimes simply they are not taking advantage of these chips because not. and and I think it's a long list, right? And these are just the industry trends that changed. But if I approach this from a different angle, from the human angle, then the way how we work has also completely changed. And I'm not talking about necessarily about the impact of the pandemic and remote working. Sure, that's of course like that's a big change as well. But in general, the way how we prefer to collaborate even before the pandemic was completely different how we collaborated in the 1990s.
Mhm.
And this mindset shift or this shift in demand has been completely ignored, and the way how collaboration, for example, because of that works nowadays,
It's
it's
painful.
it's painful. I think yeah, it's a very nice thing to say. And it's painful, but yeah, I think it just feels that we got left behind in the 1990s.
Yeah.
I mean, sending around PowerPoint documents with screenshots in emails and commenting on those, and that's like, oh come on, like obviously there is a better way of doing it. It's uh, Nobody really likes it. It's super error prone. It's super easy to lose track of the last revision or lose track of comments. It's like, and in the last 5 to 10 years, collaboration tools in other industries have proven that
Yeah.
cloud-based collaboration can solve all of these issues super efficiently and super effectively, and somehow CAD completely ignored this.
There's a bunch of stuff to unpack there because like I think the ignoring it in many cases is actually intentional, and it's because of the competitive landscape in the CAD PLM industry. There hasn't been a need to actually really innovate around these pieces until now. You're starting to see it. You're starting to see this, but I think there's like to your point about platforming. There's also like a system shift that's going to happen from like this. You hear about it all the time in SaaS. There's always a bundling and unbundling of tools. There was a massive bundling that lasted for like 20 years. There's an unbundling happening right now where people want the best tools plugged in, and it's because the other ones systemically cannot do. You can't be a system of record and change and the best collaboration creative tool in the world. Like, how would you do that, right? If you're in your creative zen and you're going through this idea on your iPad, thinking about, yes, I'm going to do this, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm about to release a change that could change how the entire plant works or whatever, and there's no process around it. Like, those two things shouldn't be together. The data should be synchronized, but there should be like a mental shift there. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because you folks have invested super heavily in the end user experience. Like I've seen
Yeah.
videos go viral of like a 2 and 3 year old kid designing on an iPad in Shapr3D, right? Like, can you imagine telling someone to get their kid to set up SolidWorks and SolidWorks actually has like thousands of YouTube videos, so like maybe that's possible. But like when I went to university, SolidWorks was actually hard to learn. Like we had an instructor teach us how to do the
Yeah.
basics of SolidWorks for an entire semester. Why did you folks invest so heavily in user experience? Most people don't care in this industry. Why did you invest there?
Most people or most companies?
Most companies don't care. Most users care a lot.
I think actually people do care quite a lot. So I think this is one of like this is one of the waves that we are riding, and this wave is like it's not a very new one. I mean, maybe like in the last 5 to 10 years,
Mhm.
people have been talking about it, and they're talking about it more and more and more. And some call it the consumerization of enterprise software. Some call it like lowering the barrier of entry and just
Mhm.
focusing like minimizing time to value. And so like there are a lot of ways to think about it. But I think that fundamental insight behind this is that customer expectations have dramatically shifted towards software in general, not just B2C software, B2B software,
Yeah.
like all kind of software. Simply, generations grew up with iPhones in their hands.
Yeah.
Generations were educated about how to adopt a new software solution without going through a sales process because software like consumer software, this is what consumer software taught for generations,
Mhm.
and not just for new generations but basically the entire industry, like everyone who have been using computers in the last like 10, 20, 30 years
Mhm.
use consumer software, and everyone got educated that, oh, like this is how software should work. And this expectation towards software that I don't want to go to a training for a week, or I don't want to talk with a salesperson just to try the product, or I want to get started by myself and explore the product by myself. These expectations are there even in the B2B buyer journey.
Mhm.
And and this is something that has to be supported heavily by the product.
Mhm.
So it's not just you can't put a free trial
Yeah.
or a free like on a product that was not built from the ground up for this kind of software adoption.
Mhm.
It's something that that has to be represented from the first line of code to the last line of code. Like every single pixel in your product has to support this approach. Simply because this is how people prefer to use products and prefer to adopt products and prefer to buy products. Um, so um, and I think this is one of the most interesting things when you talk with uh, legacy vendors, for example, legacy CAD vendors, that they like this is something that they completely missed because the go-to-market strategy or the sales strategy that they are relying on today
Hmm.
works really well with with the product that they built, but their go-to-market strategy is becoming obsolete because of the changing customer expectations. And building for this completely different go-to-market strategy requires a completely different product strategy where you must focus on building the most amazing user experience that is
Hmm.
supporting the like the self-service journey, the self-exploration, the adoption, ease of adoption. And this is why we are focusing on amazing customer experience. It's not just a gimmick, it's a highly strategic pillar, both on the product and on the go-to-market side.
And it makes a difference in people being able to actually get in and get, like you said, get the value. But like seriously, if you can pick this up and immediately figure it out, it's completely different than
Yeah,
going to another vendor where you need 6 months of role configuration just to open up your CAD tool and properly get the license to actually do the thing to try it out. That's a very different sphere of thought. And the thing that's interesting is like the person making the buying decision in the next 10 years is going to completely change what their background and profile looks like. So right now, many
absolutely.
of these big enterprises, there's still folks that have worked these tools for a long time and are used to buying that way, the old way, and they're used to having the tools where they are kind of crappy and they kind of just put up with the user experience. But even
Yeah.
that generation is really starting to change their attitude. Like the amount of times we hear
Yes.
it about how long it will take to implement because somebody's been burned by like a 3 or 4 year PLM rollout. How easy is it to use? How much training does it need? We get asked those questions every single
Yeah, yeah,
time,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's the generation that didn't grow up on iPhones. Wait till the
yeah,
generation who grew up on iPhones, who are used to just download
yeah,
everything to their phone, then try to buy software. Like it's a completely different thing, and it also goes beyond that, right? It goes beyond just the sale. It goes into how people feel. Like I fundamentally believe UX is a feeling. Like it's a feeling
yeah,
of being with people and being
yeah,
immersed, and it's the reason why Figma is so powerful in the design space. Is it feels like you are working with someone on something, and it's just a completely unbelievable difference. The same way Google Docs
yes,
was 5, 10 years ago, whenever it really became kind of mainstream. Um,
yeah.
I'm curious on like the broader hardware evolution side. When you folks think about like getting CAD into people's hands easier, think about the platform shift that you've helped enable. What role do you see Shaper playing and kind of transforming people's mindsets around other technology that we know are needed to hit these like crazy hardware goals, right? We're talking about going to Mars, we're talking about life-changing medical equipment, we're talking about like, decarbonizing the world and clean tech. That stuff's happening way too slow. Like just fundamentally, it's way too slow. And we need to shift the
Yeah.
mindset. What role do you see Shaper playing in that mindset shift for the next era of innovators?
So I think one of the most interesting trends that we are seeing at our largest customers is how the democratization of access to CAD
Mm.
inside their companies is changing their workflows. So, like, what is really really exciting that Shapr3D can be used by legacy CAD users as well, and they love it and they really appreciate what it can offer. But they can be it can be also used by people who have very little experience with CAD, and basically they were like those people who were separated from the design tool, and they had to like work together with basically with a CAD operator, with a CAD person who was like using the CAD system and
Hmm.
translating their like their ideas into a CAD document. And by opening up access to a 3D design tool to these people, the design process becomes much more efficient
Hmm.
because suddenly a CAD system, Shapr3D, becomes not just like a CAD system or a manufacturing documentation tool, but it becomes a communication tool where you can explain your ideas without needing to describe them. And it's like describing something in 3D. A lot of information gets lost. It's very very different when you show a model. Like if a picture says 1,000 words, then a 3D model says at least 2 million words, I guess. and and like as Shapr3D becomes their primary communication tool, their 3D communication tool, it is completely transforming how they work together and what they can achieve and how efficiently and effectively they can work together. I think this is really really interesting,
Mm.
and this is something that we have seen. I think, like, of course, like Figma is a great example, right? Like how Figma made design stakeholders more engaged and more involved in the design process, leading to faster product iterations, better product decisions, better engineering decisions. It's I think the same should happen in the realm of design and manufacturing, and and I think this is one of the most exciting aspects of what Shapr3D is doing in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things, I mean, you talk about Figma again as an example. Like, I'm not a designer by background, but because I had access to what our design team was doing early on, I actually learned enough to be dangerous, but also to really contribute to like the ideation process. So instead of just getting something at the end and being like, okay, this doesn't work or it doesn't meet requirements or whatever, I'm in there early, just like dropping little tidbits. And it takes me like 10, 15 seconds, right, to get access, 10, 15 minutes to do the thing, and then I'm gone. And that's like a
Yep.
fundamental rewiring of the brain. And what I always say, like, when it comes to this like hardware evolution, the next wave evolution is going to be driven by behavioral change. It's going to be
Yep.
driven by people expecting more, wanting more, and just doing these things without even thinking about it. Because like Microsoft Teams is a great example. Like COVID forced everybody basically to shift to Teams, Slack, video calls, whatever. Because of that, people who may have not before cared at all about these tools now are used to communicating with people in a real time nature. So when you go into a
Yep.
tool, the natural extension then is they expect it to happen in their tools. And if they expect it to
Yep.
be in their tools, then they expect it to be in their CAD, they expect it to be in their PLM. And it's like over time, everybody expects more and has a lower barrier themselves to like actually take on more. And that's when you start to see this like massive snowballing because you're right in the beginning about this the go to market motion changing, but it's also the adoption motions changing. Like the
Yes.
curve itself needs to be so much lower because people don't have patience for it. Like they just
Yes.
fundamentally don't care to go read a massive manual or do 3 weeks of training. Like nobody wants to do that anymore.
Yes.
Um, I'm curious, like to
I,
kind of like tie this all like together. What advice would you give to an engineering leader, someone that's like leading digital transformation in these companies, or even like someone like yourself, that 13-year-old kid who's thinking about invoking this change? Like, what would be your advice to them on like where they can, tangibly find a way to make an impact now? Because this has been around 30 years. This problem's not been like the last 3 weeks and we're just trying to figure it out. It's been 30 years. Like, what advice would you give to those people to actually make meaningful change?
um, I don't think that there is like a good like general answer
Yeah.
for this. To be honest, it's a really really tough question, and I really hate generalized answers because it always depends on the context. I think um, I think though, um, from our perspective, and I think that way how probably you guys and how we can collaborate to their success. I think what we are seeing is that introducing modern tooling in your company has a major impact on pretty much everything, on efficiency, on employee happiness, like not having to
Yeah.
fight continuously with with these old clumsy tools, and working with modern software that feels like, oh, okay, like this is how it should work in 2022,
Mm.
can actually dramatically impact your colleagues' happiness, your efficiency, your effectiveness, how you like decision making in general, hiring,
Mhm.
right? Like, so you can hire. I think if you present like a modern tooling in your company, and tools that will not make feel new candidates that they got stuck in the 1990s. I think that's also something that is especially for next generation designers and engineers, something that they really appreciate. So I think you should not underestimate the impact of modern software tooling. It actually it impacts your company in ways that you cannot even imagine today.
Yeah, and I think it's like go back to what I was saying a moment ago. I think it becomes a cultural thing. Like look at the software
Yes.
developer world. Like you are a developer. Imagine I make this example all the time. Imagine if they asked you when you started to screenshot your code, send it over email, take that down, mark it up in Paint, send it back over email, and let me know what you think. And it took 3 weeks
Yeah.
to do that. Like you wouldn't have been a software developer. You would have left because it's so just brutally painful when that can just be a PR and leave a comment right on the line of code and just get out, in the span of a couple minutes. I think that's like the shift. And I think the thing that I always tell people is like, I agree with your point. There is no one size fits all advice for all the companies. The one thing I think they can do though is actually take something that has like high value, but like an immediate return. Like something that is like not a 5 year endeavor. It could be something simple.
Yep.
It could be literally like if your team's doing drawings on paper, review, like move into the cloud. If your team is literally trying to conceptually design something, use a whiteboarding tool that's virtual, or you grab Shapr3D, like do something that is like just a step. Like take a step, and then other people start culturally saying, I want to do more. And it's like having that mindset changes everything because a lot of people don't, right? There's a lot of digital leaders, IT leaders who don't have the same mindset and they make it difficult and they're stuck to tools that
Yep.
are there and that's holding companies back
Yep.
in this whole process moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, and these things matter a lot. I mean, I think you're completely right that it can, like, these kind of things impact company culture, and how can you expect your team to come up with innovative novel ideas and thrive for excellence, and like build the most amazing stuff and design the most amazing stuff if the tools that they have to work with just like feel that they feel like how they feel.
Yeah, no, and last thing I want to ask you, kind of like wrap that whole thread through with Shaper. What are the big things you folks are focusing on now that you're able to talk about? For in the recent release, the upcoming releases, like what's on your mind in terms of impact you can have on the hundreds of thousands of people following, your journey, and relying on your products today.
Yeah, so we just had our and we just had a launch event on September 13th, and there we announced a bunch of new stuff. For example, the 1.0 version of Shaper 3D for Windows. So now Shaper 3D is fully feature power
Nice.
on Windows tablets and PCs with the Mac and the iPad version. That means that, for example, our visualization feature our real-time visualization feature is
Mhm.
available on Windows as well. We just announced brand new, incredible augmented reality features that are available on iPad. You can assign materials and textures to your model, and then
Nice.
with a single tap, you can look at it in augmented reality. It's an incredible presentation and communication tool. It elevates the presentation to a whole new level. We just announced the Shaper 3D Cloud on the event where we are building a lot of new stuff. First of all, we released Shaper 3D Sync and Shaper 3D Backup. I think the names are telling what they mean. So basically, you can seamlessly switch between your devices. So you can start designing on your iPad, and you can just seamlessly switch to your Windows computer and continue the design there. When you need a bigger screen or more horsepower, and then you can switch back and forth between your devices. Shaper 3D Backup automatically backups your designs, and we are also working on collaboration features inside Shaper 3D where our customers will be able to share and collaborate on their designs with their peers.
Nice. Nice, man. That's incredible. Yeah, I think every time you folks do one of these events, it's you're trying to push the boundary of Apple's launch days again, the same kind of energy. But like that's incredible to see. And I think like it goes back to this whole conversation we've had about the tooling, like even just the investment in something that you just said about like syncing between the platforms so that people can literally go from, their desktop at here doing something to sitting down on their iPad or back and forth and not have to worry about that. Like that's the kind of investment that every vendor should be making.
Yes.
And I think that's what makes you folks special. So I want to thank you
Yeah.
for joining us here today, and also thank you and your entire team really for actually doing the hard thing, which is investing in user experience and the end user journey. And I know we'll see a lot more exciting videos, great launch events, and killer products over the next couple of years. But thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.